William James made a claim that sounds like motivational poster material but is actually a serious psychological hypothesis. The human organism possesses far greater reserves of mental and physical energy than ordinary life ever demands, and most people die without ever discovering what they were actually capable of. He made this claim not to inspire but to explain a pattern he had observed across many domains of human achievement. The soldier under fire who performs feats of endurance impossible under peacetime conditions. The parent who lifts a car to free a trapped child. The writer who, facing a genuine deadline, produces in 3 days what they could not produce in 3 months. The prisoner who survives conditions that should, by all ordinary measures, destroy a human being, and emerges not just intact but in some respects transformed. James called these experiences demonstrations of the second wind, the discovery of energy reserves beyond what ordinary effort taps. And in his essay, The Energies of Men, published in 1907, he argued that these reserves are not exceptional exceptions available only to exceptional people in extreme circumstances. They are a general feature of human psychophysiology that all of us possess but most of us never access. The mechanism James proposed was essentially one of inhibition. At any given moment, our available energy is not limited by actual physiological capacity. It is limited by a complex of psychological inhibitors, habits of stopping, learned associations between certain stimuli and exhaustion, self-concepts that place a ceiling on what we believe ourselves capable of, patterns of anxiety and self-consciousness that consume enormous energy without producing anything. The real energy is there. The inhibitors are what stand between us and it. This has several important implications. The first is that the primary variable in human performance is not talent or raw capacity but the threshold at which inhibition kicks in. People who perform at extraordinary levels have not necessarily been given more to work with. They have, through training, through high-stakes experience, through developed intrinsic motivation, learned to push past the inhibition threshold that most people treat as an absolute limit. James identified several distinct categories of what he called dynamogenic agents, factors that release inhibited energy. The first is emergency. Crisis bypasses the ordinary inhibitory mechanisms because the cost of not responding is too high for the usual conserving mechanisms to operate. This is why people sometimes perform extraordinary feats under acute threat that they could not reproduce in any ordinary context. The energy was always there. The emergency unlocked it. The second dynamogenic agent is purpose and meaning. James observed that people animated by a deep sense of mission, by a cause larger than personal comfort or individual advancement, consistently access energy levels unavailable to those working for more ordinary rewards. The early civil rights workers who sustained activism under conditions of genuine personal danger were not drawing on unusual physical endowments. They were drawing on the extraordinary energizing power of genuine moral conviction. The third agent is a specific kind of discipline, the practice of regularly choosing the harder option when an easier one is available. Not for any specific goal, but as a general training of the will. James called this gymnastics of the will, the deliberate cultivation of voluntary discomfort that keeps the inhibition threshold high, the energy-releasing mechanisms active, and the capacity for effort sharp. This is the psychological equivalent of physical training. You push against resistance not because today's resistance matters in itself, but because tomorrow's capacity depends on today's practice. The fourth agent, and the most interesting, is what James called the systematic attempt to live at the limit of one's powers. Not the frantic, anxious pushing that comes from external pressure, but the deliberate choice to engage at the edge of one's capacity, to choose challenges that require genuine effort, to extend the working period slightly beyond what feels comfortable, to seek out the situations that demand the best one has to offer rather than settling for those where ordinary competence suffices. Modern performance science has validated James's framework in considerable detail. Research on optimal experience, challenge-skill balance, and deliberate practice all point to the same conclusion. The conditions that produce genuine peak performance are those that demand effort at or slightly beyond current capacity, in a context of sufficient safety to allow full engagement. Too far below capacity, boredom and atrophy. Too far above, anxiety and shutdown. At the edge, growth and the discovery of what was previously impossible. Post-traumatic growth research adds another Jamesian dimension. Studies consistently show that a significant proportion of people who survive serious trauma, illness, loss, accident, violence, report not just recovery but positive transformation, a deepened sense of priorities, greater appreciation of life, enhanced relationships, and sometimes a feeling of increased personal strength. They discovered, under duress, capacities they did not know they had. James would recognize this immediately as exactly what he was describing: crisis unlocking the deeper reserves. You are not running at full capacity. Neither am I. Neither was James. The question is what we do with this knowledge. Subscribe to The Psychology of William James and keep exploring what becomes possible when you stop accepting ordinary limits.